The new maid slipped the Duke a note. "Don't drink it." He looked up and the whole table fell silent. Candelabras bathed Eldenford Hall in amber light, their flames casting trembling shadows across the vast dining chamber. Crystal glinted like stars upon the long mahogany table, where the Thornwell family and their distinguished guests conversed in hushed tones, punctuated by the occasional practiced laugh. 24 noble souls and one invisible spirit, Marien Dove, the new maid who moved like a ghost between them. Duke Alaric Thornwell sat at the head, his austere features carved from marble beneath raven hair. A slight crease between his brows betrayed the tension beneath his composure as he surveyed his guests with those penetrating grey eyes. His fingers traced the stem of his untouched wineglass. "Your father would have been proud of this gathering, Alaric," Lady Saradine Thornwell remarked from her position of honour, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a severe chignon. "Particularly since we celebrate the announcement of your betrothal." The room stilled as many pairs of eyes darted toward the Duke, who offered a smile that never reached his eyes. "Indeed, mother, though I believe we have yet to make any such announcement." Lady Saradine's lips thinned. "Formalities, my son. Lord Calivar has already assured me of his daughter's acceptance." At this, Lord Calivar raised his glass, his thin lips curled into a smile beneath calculating green eyes. "To new beginnings, cousin. May your cup overflow with fortune." Marien moved silently around the table, refilling glasses, though her heart thundered in her chest. 3 hours earlier, while polishing silver in the butler's pantry, she had overheard whispers that froze her blood. "The Duke will not survive tonight's toast," a man's voice had murmured. "His health shall end faltern before the final course is served." "And the vial?" a second voice had inquired. "Already prepared. The Thornwell legacy shifts tonight." Now, as she approached the Duke with a crystal decanter, she observed Lord Calivar watching Alaric's goblet with unseemly anticipation. Her hand trembled as she leaned forward to pour. "Not yet, girl," the Duke said, his voice neither harsh nor particularly kind. Their eyes met briefly, his curious at her unusual pallor, hers wide with unspoken warning. "Forgive me, your grace," she whispered, stepping back with practiced deference. "Come now, Alaric," called Lady Hargrove from across the table, her voice dripping with amusement. "Even the servants grow nervous in your presence. One might think you're as formidable as the stories suggest." Polite laughter rippled through the room, but Marien noted how the Duke's jaw tightened, how his fingers drummed once against the tablecloth before stilling. Lord Calivar leaned forward. "The annual toast approaches, cousin. Shall we honour tradition?" "Indeed," the Duke replied, his gaze sweeping the table, "though perhaps we might allow our meal to settle first." As conversation resumed, Marien slipped into the servants' passage, her heart pounding. In the narrow corridor, she extracted a small piece of paper and a stub of pencil from her apron pocket. Her fingers trembled as she scrawled 3 words upon it, knowing such an act could cost her position, her reputation, perhaps more. When she returned bearing a silver tray of delicacies, the Duke was engaged in conversation with the gentleman to his right. Carefully, deliberately, she approached his left side, placing a small tartlet upon his dessert plate. "Oh, your grace," she murmured, and with movements practiced during her frantic moments alone, slipped the folded paper beneath his goblet as she steadied it with her other hand. No one noticed. No one except the Duke, whose fingers brushed hers for the briefest moment. A flicker of surprise crossed his features at her boldness. "We must toast," Lord Calivar announced, rising to his feet, "to the Duke of Thornwell and the prosperity of his house." Glasses rose around the table. The Duke's fingers closed around the stem of his goblet, but his thumb slipped beneath, retrieving the folded paper. With subtle grace, he opened it beneath the table's edge. "Don't drink it." His piercing gaze lifted slowly, meeting Marien's eyes across the room where she stood, hands clasped before her apron, trembling with fear yet unwavering in her resolve. He looked up, and the whole table fell silent. "Is something amiss, cousin?" Lord Calivar's voice sliced through the stillness, his knuckles whitening around his own goblet. The Duke's expression remained unreadable as he set his wine down with deliberate care. "How curious," he murmured, his tone light yet underlaid with steel. "I find myself suddenly contemplating loyalty." His gaze never left Marien's face. The maid stood frozen, aware that 25 sets of aristocratic eyes now followed the Duke's stare to rest upon her insignificant form. "Your Grace?" Lady Saradine's voice carried a warning. "Tell me, mother," the Duke said, still watching Marien. "Do you recall father's instruction about unexpected messengers?" The Duchess Dowager's face paled slightly. "I fail to see the relevance of..." He believed they were often angels in disguise. The Duke rose slowly to his feet, napkin placed precisely beside his plate. "You there, girl, approach." Marien's legs moved of their own accord, carrying her forward through a sea of scandalized murmurs. She kept her eyes downcast as protocol demanded, though she felt the scorch of Lady Ceredine's glare. "Your name?" the Duke inquired when she stood before him. "Marien Dove, Your Grace," she replied, her voice barely audible. "Miss Dove," he continued, voice pitched for all to hear, "I should like you to accompany me to my study. There is a matter requiring immediate attention." Gasps erupted around the table. Lady Hargrove's fan snapped open, fluttering frantically. "Alaric!" Lady Ceredine hissed. "Whatever this serving girl has done, surely Merryweather can handle the discipline. We are in the midst of—" "A revelation, Mother," he interrupted smoothly, "one that cannot wait." Lord Calavar stood abruptly. "Cousin, perhaps I might join you. As your closest relation, I should be privy to any concerns affecting the household." The Duke's smile was glacial. "How considerate, Calavar. However, I believe Miss Dove's information is intended solely for me." He turned toward the head butler hovering near the door. "Merryweather, please ensure our guests remain comfortable in my absence. I shall return shortly." Without waiting for further protest, the Duke gestured for Marien to precede him from the room. She moved in a daze, feeling the weight of 24 contemptuous stares upon her back. Once in the corridor, the Duke closed the dining-room doors behind them with a soft click that seemed to echo in the silence. "Now," he said, voice dropping to a whisper as he steered her toward a smaller passageway, "tell me why I should not drink my wine." Marien drew a shaking breath. I overheard a conversation, Your Grace, in the butler's pantry. They spoke of ensuring you would not survive tonight's toast. They mentioned a vial." The Duke's face hardened. "Who spoke these words?" "I couldn't see them clearly, Your Grace, but one voice—" She hesitated. "Speak freely, Miss Dove. Your candor may be my salvation." "One voice sounded like Lord Calavar's, Your Grace." A muscle twitched in his jaw, but he betrayed no other reaction. "And you risked your position, your reputation, to warn me." "I could not remain silent, Your Grace." He studied her for a long moment. "Why?" The question seemed to encompass more than her actions, and Marien found herself answering the deeper inquiry without intending to. "No one deserves to die surrounded by those who smile at their demise, Your Grace." Something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight parting of lips, as though her words had struck him physically. "So you have been at Eldenford Hall for how long?" 3 days, Your Grace." 3 days, he repeated softly. "And you show more loyalty than those who have known me a lifetime." He glanced back toward the dining room. "They will be growing suspicious. What will you do, Your Grace?" A dangerous smile curved his lips. "Spring the trap, Miss Dove." He extended his arm. "With your assistance, if you are willing." Marien stared at the offered limb in disbelief. "Your Grace cannot mean to." "I require a witness beyond reproach, someone whose motives cannot be questioned." His gaze softened. "I am asking much of you, I know, but I promise you shall have my protection, whatever comes." Hesitantly, she placed her fingers upon his sleeve. "I will help, Your Grace." "Alaric," he said suddenly, "if we are to outmaneuver those who wish me harm, I would have you use my given name when we are alone." "I couldn't possibly." "You have already saved my life, Miss Dove. I believe we have transcended formalities." Marien's cheeks colored. "As you wish, Alaric." His name felt forbidden on her tongue, like tasting wine meant for nobles. He noticed her discomfort and smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his severe features. "Come," he said, leading her toward his study. "We have a conspiracy to unravel, and precious little time." The Duke's study was a sanctuary of leather and mahogany, walls lined with books that climbed toward the ceiling. A fire crackled in the grate, casting dancing shadows across Persian carpets. Marien felt acutely out of place amidst such grandeur. Alaric moved to a cabinet and withdrew a small silver key from his waistcoat pocket. "I have suspected treachery for some time," he confessed, unlocking a drawer. "Though I had not anticipated poison." "Why would Lord Calavar wish you harm?" Marien asked, standing awkwardly near the door. "The dukedom," he replied simply. "Should I die without an heir, the title passes to him." He withdrew a small wooden box from the drawer. "My father died under similar mysterious circumstances when I was but 20. I never believed it was natural causes." Marien gasped softly. "You think Lord Calavar?" "I have no proof." He opened the box, revealing several small glass vials and a leather-bound notebook. "But I have been preparing nonetheless." A sharp knock at the door made Marien start. Alaric calmly closed the box and nodded for her to answer. Merryweather stood in the corridor, his dignified face etched with concern. "Your Grace, forgive the interruption. Lady Saradine requests your immediate return. The guests are growing restless. Inform my mother we shall return momentarily," Alaric replied, "and Merryweather, discreetly bring my untouched wine glass to the study. Handle it with the utmost care." The butler's eyes widened slightly, but he bowed without comment and departed. "You trust him?" Marien asked once they were alone again. "Merryweather has served Thornwell for 40 years. His loyalty is beyond question." Alaric returned to the box, removing a small vial of clear liquid. This will reveal the presence of several common poisons. When Merryweather returned with the goblet, Alaric dismissed him with quiet thanks. Using a glass dropper, he extracted a small amount of wine and placed it in a shallow dish. "Watch carefully, Miss Dove," he instructed, adding a drop from the vial. The wine immediately darkened, turning an unnatural purple-black. Alaric's expression hardened. "Nightshade extract. Elegant, but unoriginal." "What happens now?" Marien whispered. "Now we confront the viper," he replied, his voice deadly calm. "But first," he crossed to a small writing desk and penned a swift note. "This goes to Magistrate Holloway. Should anything happen to either of us tonight, evidence of the poisoning will reach him by morning." He sealed the letter and handed it to her. "Conceal this upon your person." As she tucked the letter into her apron pocket, their fingers brushed. Alaric paused, his gaze holding hers for a long moment. "You tremble," he observed softly. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Not for myself, but for me." His lips curved in a surprised smile. How extraordinary. Before she could respond, he reached out and adjusted the coral ribbon at her wrist, her one small adornment. The gesture was startlingly intimate. "Courage, Miss Dove," he murmured. "We return to face them together." When they re-entered the dining room, the conversation died instantly. Lady Saradine's face was a mask of barely contained fury, while Lord Calavar watched them with calculated intensity. "My apologies for the interruption," Alaric announced, escorting Marien to stand beside his chair rather than dismissing her to the servants' station. "Miss Dove has brought a matter of grave importance to my attention." "Really, Alaric?" Lady Saradine interjected. "Whatever domestic issue has arisen can surely wait until—" "It concerns my wine, Mother." Alaric lifted his goblet, studying it in the candlelight. "Miss Dove believes it may have been tampered with." The silence that followed was absolute. "What an absurd suggestion," Lord Calavar scoffed, though Marien noticed his right hand disappear beneath the table. "Surely you don't give credence to servants' paranoid fancies." "Ordinarily, perhaps not." Alaric's voice remained pleasant, conversational. However, when combined with certain conversations overheard in the butler's pantry regarding my imminent demise, I find myself inclined to investigate. Lord Calavar's face drained of colour. "What nonsense is this?" "Indeed, what nonsense," Alaric agreed, swirling the wine gently. "Perhaps you might allay my concerns, cousin. Since you selected this particular vintage and insisted it be served tonight, would you honour us by sampling it first?" He extended the goblet toward Calavar, whose eyes widened in poorly disguised horror. I couldn't possibly. The toast is meant for you, as head of the family." "I insist," Alaric said softly, dangerously. "After all, what harm could there be in a simple glass of wine between family?" Lord Calavar's hand trembled as it hovered near the goblet. "Surely you jest, cousin. I would not presume to—" "You presume to select the vintage," Alaric interrupted smoothly. "Surely you would not deny yourself the pleasure of tasting such a carefully chosen wine." Every eye at the table was fixed upon the exchange. Lady Hargrove had ceased fanning herself, her mouth slightly agape. Even the servants stood transfixed along the walls. "This is preposterous," Lady Saradine declared, though her voice lacked its usual authority. "Alaric, you embarrass yourself and insult your cousin with these wild accusations." "No accusation has been made, Mother," Alaric replied, his eyes never leaving Calavar's ashen face. "Merely an invitation to share what my cousin has so thoughtfully provided." Lord Calavar pushed back his chair with sudden violence. "I will not be subjected to this." "This spectacle. How curious," Alaric mused, setting down the goblet. "Your reluctance speaks volumes." He turned to address the stunned gathering. "Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you that someone at this table intended for this night to be my last." Gasps and murmurs erupted around the room. Lord Hargrove rose to his feet. his handlebar moustache quivering with indignation. "Duke Thornwell, these are serious allegations. What evidence supports such claims?" Alaric nodded to Marien, who stepped forward despite her terror at becoming the focus of so many noble stares. "Speak, Miss Dove," he commanded gently. She clasped her trembling hands before her. "This afternoon, your lordship, I overheard a conversation in the butler's pantry. Two gentlemen discussing how his grace would not survive tonight's toast." Her voice strengthened as she continued. "They spoke of a vial and of the Thornwell legacy changing hands." "And you recognize these voices?" Lord Hargrove pressed. "One of them, my lord. It was—" She glanced at Alaric, who nodded encouragingly. "It was Lord Calavar's voice, my lord." The room erupted in chaos. Lord Calavar lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. "Lying servant! How dare you slander a man of my standing?" "The wine has been tested," Alaric announced, his commanding voice cutting through the din. "It contains extract of deadly nightshade, enough to kill a man before the night is through." "Preposterous," Calavar sputtered. "Anyone could have tampered with it after I selected it." "Indeed," Alaric raised an eyebrow. "Merryweather, who handled the wine this evening?" The butler stepped forward, his dignity unruffled despite the tension crackling through the room. "The bottle was delivered sealed to the kitchen this morning by Lord Calavar himself, your grace. He instructed that it be served only to you, and that no one was to open it before dinner." Lord Calavar's face drained of what little colour remained. His eyes darted toward the door, calculating. "Gentlemen," Alaric said calmly, addressing the male guests, "I believe Lord Calavar may require assistance remaining with us until the magistrate arrives." Two of the men immediately moved to flank Calavar, who backed away, his composure disintegrating with each step. "This is absurd. You cannot believe—" His gaze fell upon Lady Saradine, desperation evident in his eyes. "Aunt Saradine, tell them this is madness." All eyes turned to the Duchess Dowager, whose face had gone utterly still, her hands gripping the arms of her chair. "Mother?" Alaric prompted, his voice softening slightly. "Have you nothing to say in this matter?" For a moment, Lady Saradine appeared to age before them, the rigid dignity that had sustained her crumbling at the edges. I knew nothing of poison," she whispered. "That was never discussed." The admission fell like a physical blow. Alaric's shoulders stiffened, though his expression remained controlled. "What precisely was discussed, mother?" Lady Saradine's gaze dropped to her plate. "Merely that changes were necessary, that you were too much like your father, stubborn, unwilling to consider advantageous matches." Her voice strengthened slightly. "Calavar assured me you would simply be persuaded to step aside, to relinquish certain responsibilities until you demonstrated better judgment." "Through what means?" Alaric's voice was dangerously soft. Lady Saradine did not answer, but her silence was confirmation enough. "Take her to her chambers," Alaric ordered. "She is not to leave until I have spoken with her privately." As two servants hastened to escort the unresisting Duchess Dowager from the room, Lord Calavar made his move. With unexpected agility, he overturned the nearest candelabra, sending flames licking across the tablecloth. In the ensuing confusion, he bolted for the doors. "Stop him!" Alaric commanded, but servants and guests scattered before the spreading fire. Without hesitation, Marien gathered her skirts and dashed after Calavar's retreating form. She was smaller, quicker, unburdened by the arrogance that made him believe escape was his right. As he fled down the corridor toward the main entrance, she cut through a servant's passage, emerging from a side door just as he reached the grand foyer. Calavar nearly collided with her, his momentum carrying him forward as she stepped deliberately into his path. "You!" he snarled, reaching for her throat. "This is your doing, wretched girl." His fingers closed around her neck, but in his rage, he had forgotten they stood at the top of the marble stairs leading to the entrance hall. As he pushed her backward, Marien's hands flew up, clutching the lapels of his evening coat. Together they teetered at the edge of the precipice. "Unhand her!" Alaric's voice rang through the foyer as he emerged from the corridor, followed by several guests and servants. The fire had been contained, leaving the Duke free to pursue his treacherous cousin. "Stay back!" Calavar warned, tightening his grip on Marien's throat. "Or I'll throw her down these stairs." "You would add murder of an innocent to your crimes?" Alaric took a careful step forward, his eyes never leaving Marien's frightened face. "Release her, Calavar. It's over." "Nothing is over," Calavar spat. "The dukedom should have been mine. Your father stole it from my father through that sham marriage." "Ancient history, cousin," Alaric replied evenly, "and no justification for the crimes you've attempted tonight." Marien struggled for breath as Lord Calavar's fingers dug into her throat. The world began to dim at the edges, but through the encroaching darkness, she saw Alaric's face, no longer coldly controlled, but alive with a fury that transformed his features. "Last warning, Calavar," he said, his voice soft yet carrying the edge of a blade. "Release her, or I shall show you what mercy truly looks like in its absence." Something in his tone made Lord Calavar hesitate. In that moment of uncertainty, Marien summoned her remaining strength. Her hand found the coral ribbon at her wrist, the small token of identity she permitted herself, and yanked it free. With desperate precision, she swept it across Calavar's eyes. He recoiled instinctively, his grip loosening just enough. Marien twisted away, but her foot caught the edge of the step. As she began to fall backward, a strong hand grasped her arm, pulling her forward against a solid chest. Alaric had moved with astonishing speed, catching her while simultaneously striking Calavar with enough force to send him staggering against the banister. "I have you," Alaric murmured against her hair, one arm encircling her waist, while the other hand tenderly examined the reddening marks on her throat. "You're safe now." 2 footmen seized Lord Calavar before he could recover. The man no longer resembled the polished aristocrat who had proposed a toast mere hours before. His face was contorted with thwarted rage, his clothing disheveled, his dignity in tatters. "Take him to the blue study," Alaric ordered. "Guard him until the magistrate arrives." As the footman dragged the still struggling Calavar away, Alaric's attention remained fixed on Marien. "Can you breathe? Are you injured elsewhere?" She shook her head, unable to speak yet, but drawing comfort from the protective circle of his arms. Around them, guests and servants gathered, watching the scene unfold with expressions ranging from shock to avid curiosity. Lady Hargrove pressed forward, her fan working furiously. "Your Grace, this evening has been most irregular. Perhaps we should withdraw and allow you to address these distressing family matters privately." Alaric acknowledged her with a slight nod. "My sincere apologies for the disruption, Lady Hargrove. Merryweather will arrange for carriages immediately," he addressed the assembled guests. "I thank you all for your understanding in this difficult situation." As the gathering dispersed, with Merryweather efficiently organizing their departure, Alaric guided Marien to a small antechamber adjacent to the foyer. Once inside, he closed the door and helped her to a velvet settee. "Sit," he commanded gently. "Rest a moment." Marien sank onto the cushions, suddenly aware of how her limbs trembled in the aftermath of terror. Alaric knelt before her, his eyes level with hers as he carefully examined the bruising on her neck. "I should summon the physician," he murmured. "No," she managed to whisper. "I shall be well, Your Grace." "Alaric," he reminded her, his fingers lightly tracing the marks Calavar had left. "You have earned the right to my name 100 times over this night." Colour rose to her cheeks, warming skin that had gone pale with shock. "What will happen now?" "Justice," he replied simply. "Calavar will face charges of attempted murder. My mother," he hesitated, pain flashing across his features. "My mother will require careful consideration." "She may not have known of the poison," Marien offered softly. "Perhaps not, but she knew of some scheme against me, yet said nothing." He rose and crossed to a small cabinet, returning with a crystal decanter and glass. "Brandy, for medicinal purposes." Despite everything, Marien found herself smiling at his suddenly formal tone. "Is that a ducal command, Your Alaric?" His answering smile transformed his severe features, creating a brief glimpse of the man he might have been without the weight of suspicion and betrayal. "Indeed it is, Miss Dove." She accepted the glass and took a small sip, the liquid burning a path down her injured throat yet bringing welcome warmth. Alaric claimed a chair opposite her, watching her with an intensity that made her hands tremble anew. "You risked everything tonight," he said quietly. "Your position, your reputation, your very life. Why?" The question was the same he had asked earlier, yet now it seemed to hold deeper significance. Marien considered her words carefully. "When I was a child, my father worked as gamekeeper on a small estate in Northumberland," she began, her voice strengthening as she spoke. "The lord of the manor was cruel, taking pleasure in humiliating those beneath him. One winter, my father discovered poachers on the grounds, starving villagers seeking food for their children. Instead of reporting them, he looked away." She took another sip of brandy. "Someone informed the lord. My father was dismissed without reference, our cottage seized. He died that winter and my mother followed soon after. I was 10 years old." Alaric's expression had softened, his eyes never leaving her face. "I promised myself then," she continued, that I would never stand silently in the face of injustice, no matter the cost. She met his gaze directly. When I heard them plotting against you, I could not remain silent, just as I could not remain silent for those poachers long ago. Your moral compass puts many noble houses to shame, Miss Dove, Alaric said, his voice rough with emotion. Marien, she corrected gently. If I am to use your given name, surely you might use mine? His lips curved in a slow smile. Marien, he repeated, as though tasting the syllables. Like the sea, ever-changing yet constant in its nature. A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Alaric rose to answer it, revealing Merriweather standing rigidly in the corridor. Your Grace, Magistrate Holloway has arrived, and the butler hesitated uncharacteristically. Lady Saradine is requesting to speak with you. She appears quite distressed. Alaric sighed, the weight of his responsibilities visibly settling upon his shoulders once more. Inform the magistrate I shall join him momentarily. As for my mother, he glanced back at Marien. Tell her I shall visit her chambers after justice has been addressed. Very good, Your Grace. Merriweather bowed and withdrew. Alaric turned back to Marien. I must attend to these matters. Will you wait for me? There is much still to discuss. The request held a vulnerability that belied his commanding tone. Marien nodded, unable to deny him even had she wished to. I shall wait, she promised. The grandfather clock in the corner had chimed twice before Alaric returned to the antechamber. Marien had dozed fitfully on the settee, exhaustion overtaking her despite the evening's tumult. She woke at the soft click of the door, instantly alert. Alaric looked weary, the stern lines of his face deepened by the past hours. His cravat had been loosened, his hair slightly disheveled as though he had run his hands through it repeatedly. Forgive my absence, he said, crossing to stand before the small fireplace. Events required careful handling. Marien sat up, smoothing her rumpled apron self-consciously. Lord Calavar, taken to the magistrate's custody. His trial will be swift, given the evidence and witnesses. Alaric's mouth twisted in a grimace. He confessed, in the end. Not from remorse, but from a desire to ensure my mother's name remained unsullied. And did it? Marien asked softly. Alaric stared into the dying embers. No. Though she did not know of the poison, she admitted to approving a plan to have me declared mentally unstable, following in my father's footsteps, as she put it. Bitterness colored his tone. Apparently, my refusal to marry Calavar's daughter and my eccentric habit of treating servants as human beings suggested dangerous instability. I'm so sorry, Marien whispered. He turned to face her, his expression softening. Don't be. Truth, however painful, is preferable to beautiful lies. My mother will retire to the dower house in Shropshire, where she can contemplate the consequences of her actions in comfortable seclusion. A log shifted in the grate, sending a shower of sparks upward. The dancing light illuminated the bruises darkening on Marien's throat, and Alaric's gaze hardened. You should rest, he said. I've had rooms prepared for you in the east wing, far from the servants' quarters. Marien blinked in surprise. I don't understand. You can hardly continue as a maid after tonight's events, he explained, moving to stand before her. The household has witnessed you saving my life, being attacked by my cousin and engaged in private conversation with the Duke of Thornwell. Your position would be untenable. Fear clutched at her heart. You're dismissing me? No. His vehemence startled them both. More quietly, he continued, No, Marien, I am suggesting a change in your circumstances, not your departure. What sort of change? He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically uncertain. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I know I cannot allow you to return to servitude after what you've done. He knelt before her, taking her hands in his. You saved my life tonight. Allow me to help secure yours. The intimacy of the gesture, the warmth of his hands enveloping hers, sent a tremor through Marien that had nothing to do with fear. What will the household think? They will think what they wish, he replied with a dismissive shrug. I have spent a lifetime being judged for decisions that affect no one but myself. I find I have little patience for it anymore. His thumbs traced gentle circles on her palms, the sensation both soothing and exhilarating. Tomorrow we shall discuss possibilities for your future, but tonight you need rest and recovery. And you? She asked, surprised by her own boldness. What do you need, Alaric? The question seemed to catch him off guard. He looked at her with an expression of wonder, as though she had spoken in some language only he could understand. What do I need? He repeated softly. I believe I need someone who sees me clearly, without the distortion of title or expectation. Someone who values truth over comfort, courage over convention. His fingers tightened gently around hers. "I believe I need you, Marien Dove." Her heart stuttered in her chest. "You cannot mean—" "I'm not sure what I mean," he admitted with a self-deprecating smile. "Only that tonight has changed everything, and I find myself unwilling to return to the isolation that preceded it." His expression grew serious. "I have known you mere days, yet you have shown me more loyalty than those who have known me a lifetime. That seems significant." Marien struggled to find words that wouldn't betray the tumult of emotions his touch, his words, had awakened. "The household will talk," she managed finally. "Let them." He released her hands and reached up to touch the coral ribbon she had retrieved and retied at her wrist. "This small token, it means something to you." She nodded. "It was my mother's. All I have left of her." "It saved you tonight," he observed. "Quick thinking, using it as you did." "Desperation often breeds inspiration," she replied with a small smile. "Indeed." He rose smoothly to his feet. "Come, I'll escort you to your rooms. Mrs. Winters has left nightclothes and necessities for you." As they walked the grand corridors of Eldenford Hall, Marien felt the weight of servants' curious stares. Word had clearly spread throughout the household. By morning, her actions would be the subject of whispered conversations in every corner of the estate. Alaric seemed oblivious to the attention, or perhaps simply indifferent. He walked beside her with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to being the center of speculation, his hand occasionally brushing hers in a manner that might have been accidental, but for its frequency. They reached a door in the east wing, far grander than any Marien had been permitted to enter during her brief employment. "These were my grandmother's rooms," Alaric explained, opening the door to reveal a spacious chamber decorated in soft blues and silver. "I thought you might find them comfortable. They're beautiful," Marien breathed, overwhelmed by the luxury, the four-poster bed with silk hangings, the elegant furnishings, the private sitting area before a marble fireplace where a small fire crackled welcomingly. "Mrs. Winters will attend you in the morning," Alaric said, remaining at the threshold. "Sleep well, Marien. You are safe here." As he turned to leave, Marien found herself speaking without planning the words. "Alaric?" He paused, looking back at her with raised eyebrows. "Thank you," she said simply, "for believing me when you had no reason to do so." His smile was gentle, transforming his features from aristocratic severity to genuine warmth. "You gave me the most important reason of all, Marien Dove. You risked everything for a stranger's life. How could I not believe in such extraordinary courage?" With a slight bow, he departed, closing the door softly behind him. Marien stood motionless in the center of the room, her fingers absently tracing the coral ribbon at her wrist, wondering at the strange twist of fate that had brought her from invisibility to the center of a duke's attention in the space of a single evening. Dawn filtered through gauzy curtains, casting the grand bedchamber in soft golden light. Marien woke disoriented, the luxurious bed foreign to her senses, accustomed to a narrow cot in the servants' quarters. For a moment, she believed herself dreaming, until her fingers brushed the tender bruises on her throat, and memory rushed back with painful clarity. A gentle knock at the door preceded the entrance of Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. The older woman carried a tray of tea and toast, her normally stern countenance softened with something approaching respect. "Good morning, Miss Dove," she said, setting the tray on a small table near the window. "His Grace requested you be allowed to rest, but thought you might appreciate some refreshment when you woke." Marien sat up, clutching the unfamiliar silk bedclothes to her chest. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters." The housekeeper hesitated, then said, "The household is speaking of your bravery, Miss Dove. Not many would have risked themselves as you did." "I only did what was right," Marien replied, uncomfortable with the praise. Mrs. Winters nodded approvingly. "His Grace has instructed that a bath be prepared for you, and I've taken the liberty of bringing some suitable garments." She gestured to a chair where a simple but elegant day dress in dove-grey silk lay draped. "They belonged to His Grace's late aunt, Lady Caroline. She was near your size." Marien's eyes widened. "I couldn't possibly—" "His Grace insists," Mrs. Winters interrupted firmly. "He awaits you in the morning room when you are prepared." With a slight curtsy, a gesture that made Marien flush with confusion, the housekeeper withdrew. After bathing in the copper tub brought by two maidservants who regarded her with undisguised curiosity, Marien dressed in the borrowed finery. The silk whispered against her skin, the cut and quality unlike anything she had worn before. A looking-glass revealed a transformed reflection. The gown's modest neckline emphasized her slender throat, where purpling bruises stood stark against her pale skin. She tied her coral ribbon around her wrist, the familiar token a comforting anchor in this sea of strangeness. Then, with a deep breath to steady her nerves, she left the sanctuary of the bedchamber. A footman directed her to the morning room, a light-filled chamber overlooking the eastern gardens. Alaric stood by a tall window, his tall figure silhouetted against the morning light. He turned at her entrance and for a moment simply looked at her, his expression unreadable. "You look rested," he said finally, moving to pull out a chair for her at the small breakfast table. "Though those marks on your throat concern me still, they will fade," she assured him, taking the offered seat. "Your household has been most kind, as they should be." He claimed the chair opposite hers, his posture relaxed yet retaining the inherent dignity of his station. "I trust you slept well." "Better than I expected, given the circumstances." She hesitated, then asked, "Has there been any further news of Lord Calavar?" A shadow crossed Alaric's features. "He remains in custody. The magistrate informs me that evidence of previous poisonings has been discovered among his possessions, including one that suggests he may indeed have been responsible for my father's death." "I'm so sorry," Marien said softly. "As am I." He poured tea for them both, the domestic gesture at odds with his aristocratic bearing. "But I did not ask you here to discuss Calavar's crimes. We must address your future, Marien." She curled her fingers around the delicate porcelain cup, drawing comfort from its warmth. "I understand I cannot return to my position." "Indeed not." He set down his cup with deliberate care. "I have been considering alternatives. You mentioned your father was a gamekeeper. Did he teach you to read and write?" "Yes," she replied, surprised by the question. "My mother had been a governess before her marriage. She ensured I received a proper education, despite our circumstances." Satisfaction flickered across his face. "Excellent. That expands our options considerably." He leaned forward slightly. "I have several proposals for your consideration." The word proposals sent an unexpected flutter through Marien's chest, though she knew he meant nothing beyond practical arrangements. "First," he continued, "I could arrange a position for you in London, perhaps as a companion to an elderly relation of mine. Lady Devereux is kind if somewhat eccentric, and would treat you well." The thought of London, crowded, noisy, far from the countryside she knew, held little appeal, though Marien recognized the generosity of the offer. "Alternatively," Alaric said, watching her reaction carefully, "there is a cottage on the estate near the old stone bridge. It once housed the librarian and remains in good condition. You might take up residence there, with a small stipend to ensure your comfort, perhaps working in some capacity that suits your abilities." "You would give me a cottage?" Marien asked incredulously. "For simply doing what any person of conscience should." His eyes held hers steadily. "I would provide for the woman who saved my life at great personal risk. Is that so extraordinary?" Before she could respond, a knock at the door announced Merriweather, his dignified face grave. "Forgive the intrusion, Your Grace, but Magistrate Holloway has returned. He brings disturbing news." Alaric rose immediately. "Show him in." Magistrate Holloway entered, removing his hat as he bowed to the Duke. He was a solid man with greying side whiskers and the weather-beaten complexion of one who spent much time outdoors. "Your Grace," he began without preamble, "I regret to inform you that Lord Calavar Thornwell was found dead in his cell this morning." Marien gasped softly. Alaric's expression remained impassive, though she noted how his knuckles whitened as he gripped the back of his chair. "By whose hand?" he asked quietly. "His own, it appears. He concealed a small vial of poison in his clothing, the same substance found in your wine last night." The magistrate looked uncomfortable. "Before his death, he wrote a confession exonerating Lady Saradine of any knowledge of his more extreme plans. He maintained she believed you would simply be declared incompetent, not harmed." "Convenient," Alaric murmured. "And yet, perhaps merciful. It spares my mother the humiliation of a public trial." He straightened, his face composed once more. "Thank you for bringing this news personally, Magistrate. I assume the matter is now considered closed?" "From a legal standpoint, yes, Your Grace." Holloway hesitated, then added, "Though the gossip will persist, I fear." "Gossip is the lifeblood of society," Alaric replied dryly. "I have endured worse." After the magistrate had been shown out, Alaric returned to the breakfast table, though he remained standing, his hands braced against the polished surface. "So ends the House of Calavar," he said softly. "A legacy poisoned by ambition and entitlement." "Will you go to your mother?" Marien asked. He considered the question. "Yes, though not immediately. She must come to terms with her role in this tragedy." His gaze returned to Marien. But we were discussing your future before this interruption. Have you considered my offers? The abrupt return to their previous conversation startled her. I'm not certain either would be appropriate, Your Grace. Alaric, he corrected gently. Alaric, she amended. Your generosity is extraordinary, but I fear accepting either position would only feed the gossip the magistrate mentioned. A former maid suddenly elevated to cottage resident or companion to a lady. People would talk. People always talk, he replied dismissively. Their opinions matter little to me. But they should, she insisted. You are a duke, with responsibilities that extend beyond your personal preferences. Your reputation, my reputation, he interrupted, was already the subject of speculation long before you arrived at Eldenford Hall. My mother was not entirely wrong. I do not conform to society's expectations for a man of my station. He moved around the table to stand beside her chair. Besides, I have not yet mentioned the third possibility I've been considering. Marien looked up at him, suddenly aware of how he towered over her seated form, his presence both intimidating and inexplicably comforting. What third possibility? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Alaric's expression softened as he gazed down at her. I find myself reluctant to part with you, Marien Dove. You have brought something unexpected into my life. Honesty without agenda, courage without calculation. He extended his hand, palm upward. Stand with me, please. She placed her hand in his, allowing him to draw her to her feet. They stood facing each other in the morning light, the breakfast table between them and the world beyond, momentarily forgotten. Last night changed me, he said quietly. For years I have lived in isolation, trusting few, revealing less. My father's mysterious death left me always vigilant, always suspecting. Calivar's actions proved my caution justified, but at what cost to my spirit? The price of survival, Marien suggested softly. Perhaps, but survival alone is a poor ambition for a life. His fingers gently traced the bruises on her throat. You risked everything for a man you barely knew, guided by nothing but moral certainty. Such clarity of purpose. It humbles me. Marien trembled at his touch, at the intensity in his grey eyes. Anyone would have... No, he interrupted firmly. Not anyone. Only someone extraordinary. His hand moved to cradle her cheek. I find I do not wish to release such a rare spirit back into the world, yet I have no right to keep you. Her heart raced beneath the silk of her borrowed gown. What are you saying, Alaric? I'm saying, quite poorly it seems, that I wish you to remain at Eldenford Hall, not as a servant, not as a recipient of charity, but as... He hesitated, uncharacteristic uncertainty crossing his features. As someone who might, in time, consider a deeper connection. Marien's breath caught. You cannot mean... I do not speak of marriage, he clarified quickly, though his hand remained gentle against her cheek. That would be presumptuous beyond measure given our brief acquaintance. I speak of possibility, Marien. The possibility of discovering what might grow between two people who have shared a profound experience. Relief and, curiously, disappointment warred within her. The household would still talk. Let them. His thumb brushed lightly across her cheekbone. I propose you accept the cottage by the stone bridge. You would have independence, privacy, the freedom to refuse my company should you wish it. I would call upon you with proper chaperonage until your reputation is secured. We might come to know each other as equals, unconstrained by the artificial barriers of class. Equals? She echoed incredulously. You are a duke, and you are the woman who saved his life, he countered. Which position carries more true nobility? Before she could respond, a discreet knock announced Merryweather's return. Alaric stepped back, his hand falling away from her face as the butler entered. Forgive the interruption, Your Grace, but Lady Saradine is requesting Miss Dove's presence. Surprise registered on both their faces. Alaric's expression darkened slightly. For what purpose? She did not confide in me, Your Grace, but she appeared composed. Alaric turned to Marien. You need not go if you do not wish it. She considered for a moment, then squared her shoulders. No, I will see her. Perhaps it will help bring closure to these events. Very well. Alaric nodded to Merryweather. Please inform my mother that Miss Dove will attend her shortly. When the butler had withdrawn, he took Marien's hand once more. I shall accompany you to her chambers. That isn't necessary, Marien protested. Perhaps not, but I insist nonetheless. His expression softened. We shall continue our conversation after you've spoken with her. They walked in companionable silence through the grand corridors of Eldenford Hall. Servants they passed bowed or curtsied deeply, their gazes lingering on the unusual pair, the Duke and the former maid. walking side by side as though it were the most natural thing in the world. At the entrance to Lady Ceredine's chambers, Alaric paused. "I shall wait in the adjoining sitting room. If you need me, you have only to call." Marien nodded, gathering her courage before knocking softly on the imposing oak door. "Enter," called a composed voice. Lady Ceredine sat at her writing desk, her silver-streaked hair immaculately arranged, her posture rigid with ingrained dignity. She wore a day dress of deep violet, the color of mourning without its full formality. She did not rise as Marien entered, but gestured to a chair positioned across from her. "Miss Dove," she acknowledged. "Thank you for coming." "Your ladyship," Marien replied, dropping a respectful curtsy before taking the indicated seat. Lady Ceredine studied her with cool grey eyes, so like Alaric's yet lacking their occasional warmth. "You have caused quite a commotion in this household." "That was not my intention, your ladyship. Intentions rarely matter when consequences are concerned." Lady Ceredine set aside her pen with deliberate precision. "My nephew is dead. My son nearly died. And a maid of 3 days' employment has become the center of a drama that will fuel gossip throughout the county for months to come." Marien remained silent, unsure how to respond to the recitation of facts. "I am told," Lady Ceredine continued, "that I owe my son's life to your intervention. Is this true?" "I merely warned his grace of what I overheard, your ladyship, at considerable risk to yourself." Lady Ceredine's gaze dropped to the bruises on Marien's throat. "Calivar was never one to accept defeat graciously. No, your ladyship, my son has always been peculiar in his treatment of servants," Lady Ceredine observed, her tone suggesting clinical interest rather than emotional involvement. "He believes in a strange sort of equality that his father encouraged. It makes him vulnerable to manipulation." Marien's cheeks flushed with indignation. "I have no intention of manipulating his grace, perhaps not consciously." Lady Ceredine's expression remained impassive. "But a young woman of your station, suddenly elevated to his grace's notice, might understandably have aspirations. I assure you, your ladyship, I harbored no such ambitions when I warned your son of danger. I acted only from conscience." "A convenient coincidence, then." Lady Ceredine's smile did not reach her eyes. "Regardless of your motivations, Miss Dove, you have rendered a service to the Thornwell family that cannot be denied. I'm not so blinded by pride that I cannot acknowledge a debt." She opened a drawer in her desk and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "This should provide for your future comfort. With this sum, you might establish yourself far from Eldenford Hall, perhaps in a different county where this incident will not follow you." The velvet pouch landed on the desk between them with a soft but weighty thud. Marien stared at it, understanding dawning with painful clarity. "You wish me to leave," she said softly. "I wish for normalcy to return to this household," Lady Ceredine corrected. "Your continued presence would be a constant reminder of recent unpleasantness. Surely you can see how that benefits neither you nor the Thornwell name." Marien's fingers found the coral ribbon at her wrist, drawing strength from its familiar texture. "His Grace has been kind enough to offer me a position here at Eldenford Hall." Lady Ceredine's eyebrows rose slightly. "Indeed? And what position might that be?" "I'm not entirely certain," Marien admitted. "We were discussing possibilities when news of Lord Calivar's death arrived." "I see." Lady Ceredine leaned back in her chair, her shrewd gaze assessing. "Miss Dove, permit me to speak plainly. You are a young woman of humble origins who has found herself momentarily elevated by extraordinary circumstances. My son, despite his many admirable qualities, has led an isolated life that has left him vulnerable to genuine displays of loyalty." She folded her hands precisely on the desk. "Whatever position he has proposed will inevitably lead to awkwardness. The servants will resent you, the local gentry will never accept you, and my son, once the immediate gratitude fades, will find himself in the uncomfortable position of having elevated someone who no longer serves a purpose." Each word struck Marien like a physical blow, articulating fears that had lurked in her own heart. "Your ladyship speaks harshly. I speak truthfully, Miss Dove, a quality you profess to value." Lady Ceredine pushed the velvet pouch forward. "This sum represents genuine gratitude for your service to my son. It will establish you comfortably elsewhere, where you might begin anew without the shadow of recent events." Marien made no move to take the offered payment. "And if I choose to stay?" Lady Ceredine's expression hardened. "Then you prove yourself motivated by self-interest rather than the nobility of character my son attributes to you. I believe," came Alaric's voice from the doorway. That would depend entirely on why she chooses to stay, Mother. Both women turned. Alaric stood in the open doorway, his expression controlled, but his eyes blazing with cold fury. He entered the room with measured steps, coming to stand beside Marien's chair. "I did not invite you to this conversation," Lady Saradine said stiffly, "and yet here I am." Alaric's hand came to rest lightly on Marien's shoulder, a gesture of support that did not escape his mother's notice. Attempting to bribe Miss Dove into disappearing seems a poor expression of the gratitude you claim to feel. "I'm thinking of your position, Alaric. The whispers have already begun." "Let them whisper," he interrupted. "I have endured society's judgment my entire life. It holds no terror for me." Lady Saradine's lips compressed into a thin line. "You are not thinking clearly. The events of last night have merely confirmed what I have long suspected, that loyalty is rarer than wealth, and courage rarer still." His hand squeezed Marien's shoulder gently. "Miss Dove possesses both in abundance. I would be a fool to dismiss such qualities for fear of gossip. She is a maid, Alaric." "Was," he corrected calmly. "Now she is a woman who saved the Duke of Thornwell from assassination. I believe that entitles her to a certain elevation in status. Wouldn't you agree?" Lady Saradine's gaze moved between them, her expression calculating. "You cannot possibly be considering—" "I am considering many things, Mother," Alaric interrupted smoothly. "Chief among them how best to honor the debt I owe Miss Dove, while respecting her wishes and dignity." He looked down at Marien. "Which brings me to an important question. What do you wish, Marien?" The use of her given name in his mother's presence was not lost on either woman. Lady Saradine's eyebrows rose sharply, while Marien felt heat rise to her cheeks. She hesitated, acutely aware of the tension between mother and son, knowing her answer would inevitably favor one over the other. "I wish to make my own decisions, based on what I believe right, rather than what others expect of me." A smile flickered across Alaric's face. "A commendable approach. And what decision does your conscience suggest regarding my mother's generous offer?" The subtle emphasis on generous carried a hint of irony. Marien looked at the velvet pouch, then at Lady Saradine's imperious face. "I thank your ladyship for the gesture, but I must decline. Accepting payment for an act of conscience would diminish its meaning for me." Lady Saradine's eyes narrowed. "Pride is a luxury few in your position can afford, Miss Dove." "Perhaps," Marien agreed quietly, "but it is often all we have." Alaric's hand tightened briefly on her shoulder. "I believe we have taken enough of my mother's time. She has preparations to make for her journey to Shropshire." He offered his arm to Marien. "Shall we continue our previous conversation elsewhere?" Marien rose and placed her hand upon his sleeve, feeling Lady Saradine's disapproving gaze like a physical weight. "Thank you for receiving me, your ladyship." As they turned to leave, Lady Saradine spoke once more. "Alaric," he paused, looking back at his mother with a raised eyebrow. "You are making a mistake," she said simply. "Perhaps," he acknowledged. "But it is my mistake to make, Mother, a privilege of the station you and Calivar were so desperate to control." With a slight bow, he escorted Marien from the room, closing the door firmly behind them. In the corridor, Marien released a shaky breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "I fear I've worsened the breach between you and your mother." "The breach was of her making, not yours." Alaric guided her toward a set of French doors that opened onto a private garden terrace. "Though I admit I had not expected her to be quite so transparent in her attempt to remove you." The spring air was sweet with the scent of blooming roses as they stepped outside. Marien breathed deeply, grateful for the open space after the stifling atmosphere of Lady Saradine's chambers. "She makes a valid point," Marien said quietly. "My continued presence will fuel gossip. Gossip is inevitable in a house like Eldenford Hall." Alaric led her to a stone bench beneath a blossoming cherry tree. "The only question is whether we allow it to dictate our actions." They sat side by side, a proper distance between them, though close enough that Marien could sense the warmth radiating from him, could smell the subtle scent of sandalwood that clung to his clothing. "Before we were interrupted," Alaric continued, "I was proposing a rather unconventional arrangement." "The cottage by the stone bridge," Marien recalled. "Yes." He turned slightly to face her. "Independence, with the possibility of exploration. Of whatever this connection between us might become, given time and freedom to develop naturally." "It's impossible," she whispered, though her heart argued otherwise. "The distance between our stations means nothing to me," he interrupted gently, "though I understand it may mean something to you." Marien looked down at her hands. at the fine silk of the borrowed gown, so at odds with the simple coral ribbon at her wrist. "I have no wish to be a source of difficulty in your life, Alaric. You have endured enough." "Then do not make decisions based on what you believe best for me," he replied, a hint of stubbornness entering his tone. "I am quite capable of determining that for myself. Make your choice based on what you truly want." The challenge in his voice forced her to look up, to meet those intense grey eyes that seemed to see through all pretense. "What I want," she said slowly, "is to never again feel invisible. To be valued for who I am rather than what service I provide." "Then we want the same thing," Alaric said softly, "for I too wish to be seen for myself, not merely the title I bear." A fragrant breeze stirred the cherry blossoms above them, sending pale petals drifting down around their shoulders like snow. One landed in Marien's hair, and Alaric reached out to gently brush it away, his fingers lingering against the soft strands. "Say yes to the cottage," he murmured. "Say yes to possibility." In that moment, with spring unfurling around them, and the weight of the previous night's dangers behind them, Marien found herself believing that impossible things might indeed be possible. "Yes," she whispered, "to possibility." His smile transformed his features, erasing the stern lines of duty and suspicion, revealing the man who might have existed had life been kinder. "Then it is settled. The cottage shall be prepared immediately." His hand found hers, fingers interlacing with gentle pressure. "And we shall discover, Marien Dove, exactly what fate intended when it brought you to Eldenford Hall." 3 weeks passed like fleeting dreams. Spring descended fully upon Eldenford Hall, transforming the grounds into a riot of colour and fragrance. The cottage by the stone bridge underwent a remarkable transformation as well. Its thatched roof mended, its stone walls cleaned, its gardens cleared of winter's debris and planted with herbs and flowers. Marien watched the renovation with a sense of unreality. Each morning she woke in the grand bedroom Lady Caroline had once occupied, half expecting to find herself back in the servants' quarters. The extraordinary events of that fateful dinner, nothing but an elaborate fantasy. Yet reality persisted. Lady Saradine departed for Shropshire with minimal ceremony, her farewell to Alaric stiff but correct, her acknowledgement of Marien pointedly absent. The household adjusted to her absence with surprising ease, as though a weight had been lifted from the great house. Alaric visited Marien daily, sometimes briefly, sometimes for hours of conversation in the privacy of the East Wing gardens. Always they maintained proper decorum. Mrs. Winters or another suitable chaperone discreetly present, though often engrossed in needlework or a book at a respectable distance. On this particular morning, Marien stood in the centre of the cottage's newly furnished sitting room, running her fingers along the polished surface of a small writing desk, positioned near the window overlooking the stream. "Is it to your liking?" Alaric asked, watching her from the doorway. Mrs. Winters busied herself arranging dried lavender in a vase by the hearth, providing the requisite chaperonage while allowing them a measure of privacy. "It's beautiful," Marien replied honestly, "though far grander than anything I've known before." The cottage, though modest by aristocratic standards, represented luxury beyond her previous experience. Comfortable furniture, bright windows, a small but well-appointed kitchen, 2 bedchambers, and this charming sitting room with its view of the ancient stone bridge arching gracefully over the stream. "It was designed for a scholar," Alaric explained, moving to stand beside her at the window. "The previous Duke's librarian lived here for nearly 40 years. He said the sound of the water helped him think. I can understand why." Marien gazed out at the dappled sunlight playing across the water's surface. "It's peaceful here. Too isolated, perhaps." Alaric studied her face. "You would be a quarter mile from the main house." "I think I shall appreciate the distance," she admitted. "The servants still watch me as though I might suddenly sprout wings or a second head." Alaric chuckled, the sound warming her more than the spring sunshine. "They'll adjust in time. Humans are remarkably adaptable creatures, some more than others." She turned to face him. "The village must be buzzing with gossip by now." "Undoubtedly," he agreed without concern, "though the story has grown considerably in the telling. According to Mrs. Winters, the baker's wife believes you are a foreign princess in disguise, rescued from piratical kidnappers." Marien couldn't suppress a laugh. "How terribly exotic. I fear the truth is far more mundane." "I disagree." His expression softened. "There is nothing mundane about courage, Marien." The way he said her name, like something precious held on the tongue, still sent a flutter through her chest that no amount of rational thought could suppress. "When shall I move in?" she asked, changing the subject. "Whenever you wish, the cottage is ready." He gestured around them. "Mrs. Winters has stocked the pantry, and I've taken the liberty of filling the small bookcase with volumes I thought might interest you." Marien crossed to examine the collection, an eclectic mixture of poetry, novels, history, and natural philosophy. "How thoughtful," she murmured, touched by the consideration evident in his selections. "I confess I had assistance," Alaric admitted. "Miss Harrington proved invaluable in suggesting titles a young woman might enjoy." "Miss Harrington?" Marien looked up in surprise. "The vicar's daughter," he explained, "a well-read young woman who often borrows from the Eldenford library. She has expressed interest in making your acquaintance." Warmth bloomed in Marien's chest at this unexpected consideration. "You've spoken of me to others?" "I have mentioned that a young woman of exceptional character will be residing in the librarian's cottage," he replied carefully. "Miss Harrington is a person of good sense and discretion. I believe you might find friendship there should you wish it." The thought of friendship, normal, uncomplicated female companionship, was unexpectedly appealing. Since her arrival at Eldenford Hall, Marien had existed in a strange limbo, no longer a servant, not quite a lady, isolated by the extraordinary circumstances of her elevation. "I would like that," she said softly. Alaric smiled, clearly pleased by her response. "Excellent. Perhaps we might invite her to tea next week once you've settled in." "That would be lovely." Marien's fingers traced the spine of a volume of Wordsworth's poetry. "Though I wonder what explanation you've given for my presence here." "The truth, in essence," he replied, "that you prevented a grave injustice and have earned my protection and gratitude. Society loves nothing more than a mysterious benefactress." "Hardly mysterious," she demurred, "and certainly not a benefactress." "You saved my life," he reminded her gently. "What greater benefit could one person bestow upon another?" Before she could respond, Mrs. Winters cleared her throat discreetly. "Pardon, Your Grace, but the steward awaits you in the main house. The matter concerning the East Fields requires your attention." Alaric nodded. "Thank you, Mrs. Winters. I shall return directly." He turned back to Marien. "Will you walk with me to the bridge before I go?" She nodded, and they stepped outside into the warm spring air, Mrs. Winters following at a respectful distance. The path to the stone bridge was lined with bluebells, their delicate heads nodding in the gentle breeze. "I've been considering your future occupation," Alaric said as they walked. "You mentioned your mother was a governess before her marriage." "Yes," Marien confirmed. "She taught the children of a minor baronet in Northumberland." "Would you consider a similar role? Not immediately, of course, but perhaps in time." The vicar mentioned that several families in the parish seek qualified instruction for their daughters. Marien considered the suggestion. "I believe I would enjoy teaching," she said thoughtfully, "though my qualifications are informal at best. Yet substantial," he countered. "Your letters reveal a fine education and natural intelligence. I could arrange for additional instruction if you wished it. Music, drawing, modern languages." They reached the stone bridge, pausing at its center to gaze down at the clear water flowing beneath. Mrs. Winters remained at the end of the bridge, providing the illusion of privacy while maintaining propriety. "You are extraordinarily generous, Alaric," Marien said softly. "I fear I shall never be able to repay such kindness." "I seek no repayment," he replied, his voice equally low. "Only the pleasure of seeing you thrive." His hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the ancient stone parapet. "I have lived much of my life in isolation, Marien, trusting few, enjoying fewer still. These past weeks have been illuminating." The warmth of his hand upon hers, the intensity in his grey eyes, the gentle cadence of his voice, all combined to create a moment of perfect clarity. Whatever lay between them, gratitude, friendship, or something deeper, it was genuine, unmarred by artifice or expectation. "For me as well," she admitted. His fingers tightened briefly around hers. "Then we are agreed. You shall move into the cottage tomorrow, begin your new life, and we shall see what possibilities unfold." "Agreed," she whispered, turning her hand beneath his so their palms met, fingers intertwining in a brief forbidden clasp before propriety reasserted itself, and they stepped apart. As they walked back toward Mrs. Winters, Alaric said in a more normal tone, "I shall call upon you Tuesday next, if that suits. Perhaps we might walk to the village church. The medieval stained glass is quite remarkable. I should like that very much." He bowed formally over her hand. "Until tomorrow then, Miss Dove. Until tomorrow, Your Grace." He departed with long, confident strides, leaving Marien standing beside Mrs. Winters, watching his tall figure disappear around the bend in the path. "He's a changed man," the housekeeper observed quietly. Lighter somehow, despite recent troubles. Marien glanced at the older woman, surprised by the personal observation. I cannot claim credit for any such change. Mrs. Winter's shrewd eyes assessed her. Cannot or will not, Miss Dove. Both, perhaps, Marien replied honestly. The Duke has endured much. If he finds some comfort in conversation with me, I am glad of it, but I harbour no illusions about my place in his world. His world, Mrs. Winters repeated thoughtfully, a curious phrase. His Grace has never fully inhabited the world others expected of him. Perhaps that explains his interest in one who similarly defies expectation. Before Marien could formulate a response to this unexpected insight, Mrs. Winters returned to practicalities. Shall we review the kitchen stores before returning to the main house? If you're to take possession tomorrow, we should ensure everything is prepared. The morning Marien moved into the cottage dawned clear and bright, as though nature itself approved the transition. A small carriage transported her modest possessions, the few personal items she'd brought to Eldenford Hall as a maid, supplemented by gifts Alaric had insisted she accept. Several simple but elegant gowns, a warm shawl, practical boots, and a writing case complete with paper, ink and pens. To encourage correspondence, he had explained when presenting the latter, though they both knew they would see each other regularly. Mrs. Winters accompanied her, fussing over the arrangement of the bedroom, ensuring the kitchen fire burned properly, demonstrating the peculiarities of the cottage's ancient but serviceable water pump. Simpson will deliver fresh milk each morning, the housekeeper explained, and bread twice weekly from the main house. His Grace has instructed that you're to request whatever else you require. His generosity is overwhelming, Marien murmured, standing in the center of the sitting room that was now improbably hers. He can afford it, Mrs. Winters replied practically, and it pleases him to provide for you. Once everything was arranged to the housekeeper's satisfaction, she prepared to depart. Jenkins will call this afternoon to tend the garden. His Grace thought you might enjoy selecting what vegetables and flowers you'd prefer planted. That's very thoughtful. Mrs. Winters paused at the door, her normally stern countenance softening slightly. This arrangement is irregular, Miss Dove. There will be talk. I know, Marien acknowledged. I can only hope my conduct will eventually silence the worst of it. See that it does. The housekeeper's tone was not unkind but carried unmistakable warning. His Grace has placed great trust in you. Do not disappoint him. After Mrs. Winters departed, Marien explored her new domain with a sense of wonder. The cottage, though small, offered more space and privacy than she had ever known. She ran her hands over smooth wooden surfaces, admired the simple but pretty curtains at the windows, tested the comfortable chair positioned near the fireplace, a home of her own. The concept seemed fantastical, yet here she stood. Near midday, a knock at the door announced Jenkins, the undergardener, a ruddy-faced young man who touched his cap respectfully and avoided meeting her eyes directly, clearly uncertain how to address her. His Grace sent me to help with the planting, miss, he explained, gesturing to a wheelbarrow filled with seedlings and tools. If you'll tell me what you'd like where, I'll get it all sorted. They spent a pleasant hour planning the small kitchen garden behind the cottage. Jenkins proved knowledgeable, and as he relaxed, quite talkative. Been with Eldenford Hall since I was a boy, he told her, as they marked spaces for herbs and vegetables. My father was head gardener before Mr. Patterson. Never seen His Grace take such an interest in a tenant cottage before, begging your pardon for saying so. The Duke has been very kind, Marien replied carefully. Jenkins nodded. Always was fair, His Grace, not like some. Speaks to us regular folk like we got brains in our heads. He hesitated, then added, Folks say you saved him from poison. That true, miss? There was an unfortunate incident at dinner, she acknowledged, unwilling to gossip about her employer, but recognizing the young man's honest curiosity. I was fortunate to be in a position to help. Brave thing to do, Jenkins said admiringly. Not many would risk themselves for the gentry, even one as decent as His Grace. Any person of conscience would do the same, Marien insisted, though she knew this was not strictly true. Jenkins looked skeptical but didn't argue. Well, you're a hero to the staff, if you don't mind me saying so. That Lord Calavar was a nasty piece of work, always finding fault, making threats. None of us sorry to see the back of him. The conversation turned to practical matters after that, which plants required full sun, how often to water during dry spells, when the first vegetables might be harvested. By the time Jenkins departed, Marien felt she had made her first friend among the Eldenford staff. As evening approached, she prepared a simple meal from the provisions Mrs. Winters had stocked, finding unexpected pleasure in tending her own fire, cooking to her own preferences without consideration of others' schedules or requirements. She ate by the window, watching as golden light transformed the ancient stone bridge into something from a fairy tale: independence. After years of service to others' needs, the sensation was both exhilarating and terrifying. What would she make of this unexpected gift? What would she become in this small sanctuary Alaric had provided? As darkness fell, she lit candles and settled in the comfortable chair with one of the books he had selected for her, a volume of poetry by Christina Rossetti. The verses spoke of love and longing, of patience and transformation, resonating in ways that both comforted and disquieted her. A soft knock at the door startled her from her reading. Setting aside the book, she crossed the room, wondering who might call at such an hour. Alaric stood on her threshold, a lantern in his hand, casting warm light across his aristocratic features. Behind him, a footman held the reins of his horse. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, his voice low. "I wished to ensure you had settled in comfortably." "Please come in," she invited, stepping back to allow him entry. He hesitated. "It's rather late for a proper call." "We are hardly conventional in any case," she replied with a small smile. "Besides, your footman provides adequate chaperonage, does he not?" Alaric's answering smile sent warmth coursing through her. "Indeed. Thomas, wait here. I shan't be long." He entered the cottage, setting the lantern on a small table near the door. In the soft golden light, his tall figure seemed to fill the modest room, yet he appeared entirely at ease in the simple surroundings. "How do you find your new home?" he asked, glancing around with evident satisfaction at the neatly arranged space. "Wonderful," she replied honestly, "though it will take time to grow accustomed to such luxury." He chuckled. "Luxury is relative, I suppose. To me it seems quite humble. To me it is a palace." She gestured to the chair she had vacated. "Please sit. May I offer you tea?" "No, thank you. I cannot stay long. Propriety may bend, but should not break entirely." He remained standing, though his posture was relaxed. "I came only to bring you this." From his pocket he withdrew a small package wrapped in tissue paper, a housewarming gift of sorts. Marien accepted it with murmured thanks, carefully unwrapping the delicate paper to reveal a small silver frame. Within it was a miniature watercolor painting of the cottage and bridge, rendered with exquisite detail and bathed in the golden light of sunset. "It's beautiful," she breathed, tracing the delicate brushwork with her fingertip. "Did you commission it?" "I painted it myself," he admitted, a hint of self-consciousness in his tone. "A hobby from my university days. I'm rather out of practice, I fear." "You're very talented." She looked up at him in wonder. "I had no idea. Few do. My mother considered it an unsuitable pastime for a duke." His smile held a touch of irony, one of many points of contention between us. Marien studied the painting more closely. "You've captured it perfectly, the way the light strikes the stones at dusk, how the water seems to catch fire beneath the bridge. I'm pleased you like it." His gaze lingered on her face, warming her more effectively than the fire crackling in the grate. It seemed fitting, a new beginning captured in permanent form. "Thank you," she said softly. "I shall treasure it always." He moved toward the door, propriety reasserting itself. "I should take my leave. Tomorrow brings the tenant farmers with their quarterly reports, a tedious but necessary duty." "Of course." She followed him to the threshold. "Thank you for calling, Alaric, and for the painting." "Until Tuesday," he reminded her. "The medieval stained glass awaits." "Until Tuesday," she echoed. He bowed formally, then surprised her by taking her hand and raising it briefly to his lips, a gesture both proper and startlingly intimate. "Good night, Marien." "Good night, Your Grace." As she watched him mount his horse and ride away, the small painting clutched to her chest, Marien acknowledged the truth she had been avoiding since that fateful night when a hurriedly scrawled note had changed both their lives. She was falling in love with the Duke of Thornwell. The realization brought neither joy nor sorrow, only a quiet certainty that felt as inevitable as the changing of seasons. Whatever came of it, heartbreak or happiness, she would face it with the same courage that had prompted her to warn him of danger all those weeks ago. Returning inside, she placed the painting on the mantelpiece, where firelight made the tiny silver frame gleam like a star fallen to earth. Then, with deliberate care, she untied the coral ribbon from her wrist and laid it beside the painting. Two tokens of identity, old and new, marking the beginning of a chapter she had never imagined possible. The seasons turned like pages in a well-loved book. Spring surrendered to summer's golden embrace, and the cottage garden flourished under Marien's attentive care. Herbs scented the air, Vegetables grew in neat rows, and flowers bloomed in cheerful profusion, a tangible reflection of her own blossoming life. As Alaric had suggested, she began tutoring several young girls from the village, discovering an unexpected talent for teaching. 3 days each week, the cottage sitting room transformed into a makeshift schoolroom, filled with the sounds of recitation, music practice, and occasional laughter when lessons took unexpected turns. "You've quite a gift," Alaric observed one afternoon in late August, having arrived as her students were departing. He stood at the garden gate, watching as 3 young girls curtsied respectfully before scampering down the lane toward the village. "Miss Harrington tells me the Wilsons are considering sending their daughters as well. I should enjoy the challenge," Marien admitted, inviting him inside where Mrs. Winters waited with embroidery in hand. The housekeeper had become their regular chaperone during his visits, her presence ensuring propriety, while her discretion allowed for relatively natural conversation. "Though I fear I shall soon require a larger classroom. Perhaps arrangements could be made at the village hall," he suggested, accepting a glass of lemonade, "or one of the unused rooms at Eldenford might be repurposed." Their conversations had acquired this comfortable rhythm over the months, practical problems discussed and solved, books and ideas exchanged, observations about the estate and village shared. Beneath this pleasant surface, however, ran deeper currents neither had yet dared to name. Alaric's visits had become as regular as clockwork, Tuesday afternoons, Thursday mornings, Sunday after church services. They walked the grounds of Eldenford Hall, explored the village, attended local assemblies where Marien was introduced simply as Miss Dove, a connection of the family. Speculation persisted, of course. Some whispered that she was a distant relative fallen upon hard times. Others insisted she was the Duke's natural daughter from some youthful indiscretion. The truth, that she had begun as a maid and saved his life, seemed too fantastical for local gossips to credit, though it remained the most persistent rumor. Through it all, Marien maintained a quiet dignity that gradually earned, if not acceptance, then at least a measure of respect from the community. Miss Harrington's friendship proved invaluable, providing entree to circles that might otherwise have remained closed to her. "You've transformed the cottage," Alaric noted, glancing around at the room that now reflected Marien's personality, books arranged by subject rather than size, fresh flowers in simple pottery vases, a half-finished embroidery project beside her reading chair. "It has become a true home." "Thanks to your generosity," she reminded him. "Thanks to your spirit," he countered. "A house requires life to become a home." Mrs. Winters cleared her throat discreetly. "If you'll excuse me, I believe I left my other needles in the carriage." She departed with the unhurried dignity that characterized all her movements, leaving the door properly ajar, but granting them a rare moment of relative privacy. Alaric set down his glass, his expression growing serious. "I received a letter from my mother this morning." "Oh?" Marien tried to keep her tone neutral, though the mention of Lady Ceradine still brought a flutter of anxiety. The Duchess Dowager had maintained her exile in Shropshire, communicating with her son through formal, infrequent correspondence that never mentioned Marien's existence. She writes that she has accepted an invitation to winter in Florence with her sister, Lady Pembroke. His mouth curved in a wry smile. "I suspect the English countryside has proven insufficient distraction from recent unpleasantness. Italy will surely provide novel diversions," Marien offered diplomatically. "Indeed." Alaric rose and moved to the window, gazing out at the garden she had cultivated with such care. Her departure occasions certain reflections. "What sort of reflections?" Marien asked, sensing a shift in his mood. He turned to face her, his expression uncharacteristically vulnerable. "These past months have been illuminating, Marien. The time we've spent together has brought me a contentment I scarcely believed possible after years of isolation and suspicion." Her heart quickened. "I have found great happiness as well. Have you?" His gaze held hers intently. "Truly? This life, so far removed from what your birth prepared you for, it satisfies you." "More than I could have imagined," she replied honestly. "Teaching brings me joy. The cottage is a sanctuary, and your friendship—" She hesitated, then continued with quiet courage. "Your friendship has been the greatest gift of all." "Friendship," he repeated softly. "A pale word for what has grown between us, I think." Before she could respond, Mrs. Winters returned, effectively ending the moment of candor. The conversation turned to safer topics: the upcoming harvest festival, plans for autumn planting, a new book of poetry recently published in London. Yet something had shifted. A door cracked open that could not be fully closed again. 2 days later, Alaric arrived unexpectedly as Marien was deadheading roses in her front garden. No carriage accompanied him, no footman or groom, only his favorite horse tethered to the garden gate. "Alaric," she exclaimed, setting aside her shears and wiping soil-stained hands on her apron, "I didn't expect you today. Forgive the intrusion." His expression was grave yet animated with some inner purpose. "I find I could not wait until Thursday." "Is something wrong?" she asked, noting his unusual solemnity. "Not wrong, no." He glanced around, seeming suddenly aware of their exposed position. "Might we speak inside?" "Of course, though Mrs. Winters is not here," she warned, leading him toward the cottage. "Perhaps we should remain in the garden." "What I have to say cannot wait upon propriety," he replied cryptically, following her into the sitting room. Inside, he paced the small space like a caged lion, his tall figure seeming too large for the modest room, his energy barely contained. "Alaric, you're alarming me," Marien said, watching his agitation with growing concern. "Please tell me what troubles you." He stopped abruptly, turning to face her with an expression of such intensity that she caught her breath. "I find myself at a crossroads, Marien. For months I have visited you, talked with you, grown to know you with a depth I have experienced with no other. Yet always we have maintained this careful distance, dictated by society, by the difference in our stations, by my own uncertainty." Her heart pounded so loudly she was certain he must hear it. "I understand the necessity of such boundaries." "Do you?" He moved closer, his grey eyes searching her face. "Or do we merely accept them because challenging them requires courage we haven't yet found?" "What are you saying, Alaric?" she whispered. "I'm saying that I love you, Marien Dove." The words fell between them like stones into still water, creating ripples that could never be undone. "I have loved you since you slipped that note beneath my glass. Perhaps even in that first moment when our eyes met across a dinner table where death waited." She stood frozen, unable to believe what she was hearing. "Your silence concerns me," he said after a moment, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his features. "Perhaps I have misread—" "No," she interrupted, finding her voice at last. "You haven't misread anything. I simply never dared hope that you might—" She swallowed hard. "That you might return feelings I have harbored these many months." Relief transformed his expression. "You love me as well?" "With all my heart," she admitted, feeling as though a weight had lifted from her chest. "Though I believed such love impossible, given who we are." "Who we are," he repeated softly, taking her hands in his. "A duke and a former maid. Society would certainly find the match unsuitable." "Beyond unsuitable," she agreed. "Scandalous. Your position, your responsibilities—" "My position grants me certain privileges," he interrupted gently, "including the freedom to choose my own happiness. My responsibilities to the estate, to my tenants, to my family name, are best fulfilled by a man of sound heart and mind. You, Marien Dove, have restored both to me." "Your mother will never accept such a match," she protested, though her resistance weakened with each moment of contact between them. "My mother forfeited her right to dictate my choices when she conspired with Calavar," he replied firmly. "Besides, Italy is very far away." Despite everything, Marien laughed, a sound of pure joy breaking free. "You cannot be serious." "I have never been more serious in my life." Still holding her hands, Alaric sank gracefully to one knee before her. "Marien Dove, you saved my life with a note of warning. Now I ask you to save it again by sharing it. Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Time seemed to suspend itself as she looked down at him, this proud, solitary man kneeling before her in defiance of all societal expectation. In his eyes she saw not the Duke of Thornwell, but simply Alaric, the man who had recognized her courage, valued her mind, and ultimately opened his guarded heart to her. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Alaric, I will marry you." He rose and drew her into his arms, propriety forgotten as his lips found hers in a kiss that sealed their unlikely journey from maid and master to equals in love's democracy. When they finally parted, breathless and flushed, he pressed his forehead against hers. "There will be talk," he warned, though his smile suggested he cared little for such concerns. "Let them talk," she replied, echoing his own words from months before. "We know the truth of who we are." "And who are we, Marien?" he asked softly. She touched his face gently, marveling at her freedom to do so. Two souls who found each other across an impossible divide. A maid who saw a man in danger, not merely a duke. A nobleman who recognized nobility in a servant's courage. "Poetry," he murmured appreciatively. "You've been reading my books." "I've been writing my own story," she corrected. "With your help." He kissed her again, more gently this time. "Our story has only just begun, my love, and I intend for it to be a very long tale indeed." 2 months later, in the small Norman church that had stood for centuries near Eldenford Hall, the Duke of Thornwell married Marien Dove. The ceremony was modest by aristocratic standards, but overflowed with genuine well-wishers. Tenants who respected their fair-minded landlord, villagers who had come to admire the quiet dignity of the former maid, servants who had witnessed the unlikely romance unfold. Miss Harrington served as bridesmaid, Mrs. Winters wept discreetly into her handkerchief, and Jenkins had filled the church with flowers from the Eldenford greenhouses. Lady Saradine sent a brief but correct note of acknowledgement from Florence, along with a pair of antique pearl earrings that had belonged to Alaric's grandmother. As they emerged into autumn sunshine, husband and wife paused on the church steps. Marien's simple ivory gown gleamed in the golden light, and at her wrist, visible beneath delicate lace, she wore her coral ribbon, a reminder of the courage that had led her to this moment. "Happy, Duchess?" Alaric murmured, his hand warm against her back. "Happier than I ever dreamed possible," she replied, gazing up at the man who had seen beyond her station to the woman beneath. "Though I fear I shall never grow accustomed to that title." "You have time," he assured her, smiling down at her with unguarded tenderness. "A lifetime, in fact." Together, they descended the steps to begin that lifetime, a journey neither could have imagined on that fateful evening when a new maid slipped the Duke a note, "Don't drink it," and he looked up, and the whole table fell silent. In life's grandest mansions and humblest corners, true nobility is not determined by the circumstances of one's birth, but by the courage of one's actions. Marien and Alaric's journey reminds us that the boundaries society erects between people, class, wealth, status, are but illusions when measured against the authentic connections of the human heart. Their story teaches us that sometimes the greatest acts of courage are not dramatic battles, but quiet moments of moral clarity when we choose to speak truth, regardless of consequence. In a world that often values appearance over substance, remember that one note of warning, one moment of genuine concern for another, can alter the course of destinies. Like the coral ribbon at Marien's wrist, carry with you some token of your truest self, and let it guide you when convention would silence your voice. For it is not the grandeur of our surroundings, but the integrity of our choices that reveals our true worth. Did this tale of courage, forbidden connection, and love that transcends social boundaries touch your heart? Subscribe to our channel for more enchanting Victorian romances that transport you to a world of passion, intrigue, and timeless emotion. Every week, we bring you a new story where love triumphs over adversity and courage is rewarded with happiness. Leave a comment sharing your favorite moment from Marien and Alaric's journey. Was it the fateful note that saved his life, their walks by the stone bridge, or perhaps the moment he knelt before her, defying all convention? Your engagement helps our stories reach others, seeking the same escape into a more romantic era. Thank you for joining us on this adventure, and remember, sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the smallest acts of courage. Thank you for listening from all of us at Victorian Romance, Audio Stories. Until next time, may your own story be filled with courage, connection, and love that sees beyond all boundaries.